I guess, Jeff, is I don't. I want to know what's behind the smoke, but I have the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from even the fragmentary reports from people on the ground, stories beyond horror, people jumping out of windows because of the flames. The fact that this happened shortly before 9 and then the second hit shortly after 9 means that most of the people were either right in the vicinity or actually at their desks. So one doesn't want to be overly grim, but the fact is there were large thousands of people were in these two buildings.
And again, 50,000 people come to work in those buildings. Many thousands more pass through those buildings every day. There are retail shops on the lower floors of the Trade Center.
It is where the PATH trains from New Jersey come in.
Correct. The trains, the commuter trains coming from the other side of the river from New Jersey come in and drop off and pick up their passengers. So it is an extraordinarily busy area. It is also an area, for a number of reasons, rich in symbolism to this city and to the country. You can see from where we are the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor in the scene. So that's what happened in New York. At about the same time, and again, I don't want to put times on much of this yet, after one of these hijacked planes hit the Trade Center in New York, events started to unfold in Washington. A plane hit the Pentagon. And then there was a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon has now been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The president, who was in Florida, went before cameras to denounce, as you would expect, and as we would expect, this terrorist attack, promising to hunt down those responsible. It was the president himself who first used, at least as I heard the story unfold today, the word terrorism. There was no doubt in his mind, at least. The president now is heading back. We are now getting a report from that American Airlines says that one of its flights, a flight from Boston to, I believe, Los Angeles, correct me guys if I'm wrong, is down, or at least they've lost contact with it. 81 people on board. This would be the second of American Airlines flights to have been involved, presumably, in this event. Another flight, this one from Dulles to Los Angeles, is down with 54 passengers on board. So again, so there are two American Airlines, one Dulles, Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, the other Boston to Los Angeles. Both American Airlines planes reported by the airline to be down. It is also believed that an American Airlines plane, a 767, was involved in one of the hits on the Trade Center as well. We don't know if there's a reason why it is American and not any other. We won't speculate as to whether there is or not. We'll just tell you what the facts are as we get them, and that's what we have. American says 2 of its planes down, and I assume that is 2 other than the one that hit the Trade Center, and you guys check that out to make sure I'm right. Jeff.
And we have a report of a crash in Somerset County, outside of Pittsburgh.
Right, I believe a 767, though we're getting reports perhaps a 747, which doesn't quite fit into what we believe flies Chicago to New York, is also down as well, and I do not know the airline involved there. Let me just go back okay, I do now. It's a United Airlines plane. So we have a number of planes down, a number of planes involved in these attacks. The Boston to Atlanta, if I'm reading the notes correctly, had an American 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots.
Flight 11.
Reported down. That's American Airlines Flight 11. And American Airlines Flight 77, which is a 757 jetliner, Dulles Airport outside of Washington to Los Angeles International, with 58 passengers on board, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots, also reported down. And then there is this United Airlines jet, which crashed about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh.
We should also mention, I think, Aaron, that inevitably some of these early fragmentary reports are going to be needing correction, and that will be done as soon as possible. We had a report of a second hijacked plane on the way to Washington. Capitol Police were reporting that there have been no signs of that plane. We simply, at this point in this awful story. Have to just tell our viewers we will do everything we can to report this accurately. If fragmentary reports need amending or correcting, that will be done
Well,
immediately.
And I think in fairness here, there is in a number of places right now, perhaps 4 or 5, chaos. And numbers that come out aren't necessarily going to hold up. And in our reporting, we will be a bit conservative on some of this until we track it down. There's no point in allowing this thing to seem worse than it is. It is already horrendous, and we don't need to make it any worse by misstating numbers, and we want you to keep that in mind. CNN Medical Unit reports that the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, the Centers for Disease Control, is preparing bioterrorism teams to respond to the incidents. This, we are told, is simply precautionary. We have absolutely no reports and no evidence that there is any biochemical or bioterrorism going on, but clearly what is happening in every department of the United States government, and I suspect in every department of most major cities right now, the plan that they hope they never have to implement, the plan that they spent years preparing, is now in effect, not just here, not just in Washington, but around the country, because no one knows precisely where this is going. CNN, my colleague Judy Woodruff joins us from Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we've been watching this here in the Washington Bureau. I'm in the studio now just a few blocks from the Capitol, from the United States Capitol, and the first thing I want to tell you is that everyone I'm sure on their minds is God rest the souls of those who've lost their lives this morning in New York, in Washington, near Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. It is just a story for which there are no words to describe. Here in Washington, we are keeping a very close watch on the Pentagon. You've been reporting, Aaron, and other CNN correspondents. A plane evidently crashed, a commercial jetliner crashed into the Pentagon earlier this morning. Approximately 60-foot section of this building, which is, of course, the headquarters of all the military for the United States, was on fire as a result of this crash, and then collapsed. These are some of the pictures we've been bringing our audience from the Pentagon. We've watched people being treated by first aid personnel there. We have no information yet on casualties, on the number of people who may have been hurt or may have died in this incident, although emergency personnel on the scene have said surely there have been casualties there. Elsewhere in Washington, every federal building has been evacuated or is in the process of being evacuated. I'm now told that United Airlines is now saying that flight, can you tell me the number of the flight? 93 has crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, a flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. Now, we don't know if this is the same airplane that Aaron was reporting a little earlier crashed in Somerset County near Pittsburgh. Aaron had reported that some minutes ago, and now we are getting a confirmation from United Airlines that its flight, United 93, on the way to San Francisco has crashed. So we now have at least 2 commercial airline companies in the United States. American Airlines reporting 2 of its passenger jets down, one flight, Dulles in Washington to Los Angeles, and then another flight from Boston to Los Angeles down, and now we have United Airlines reporting at least 1 airline or airliner down with concern about another one. So the pieces of this story continue to come together. I have to say, in my 30 years as a journalist, I have never seen anything like this, never covered a story of the dimensions of this, and I'm sure it's safe to say that's the case for my colleague Aaron Brown and for any one of the other many correspondents, producers, and others with CNN and our colleagues at the other news networks. And I would just remind you that CNN right now has producers, correspondents all around the world who are watching for any more information that we can bring you at this point. As Aaron and Jeff Greenfield have been saying in the last few minutes, everything we have right now is fragmentary. We are simply reporting to you what we are learning from police, from the federal government, from the CIA, from David Ensor, from our other correspondents. And I'm now told that former U.S. Army Commander General Wesley Clark is joining us on the telephone. Former commander of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas. General Clark, from your knowledge of the military, you know the Pentagon. What are you thinking right now?
Well, good morning, Judy. First of all, we've got to try to assess what's really happening, and as all of the news reports indicate, it's clearly a coordinated effort. It wasn't announced, and it hasn't been announced that it's over, and we don't know how it will finally conclude, so there's likely to be more trouble before all of this concludes. So we've got to protect the American people first. We've got to look after those who are injured. We've got to take precautionary measures to deal with future incidents, and I think all of that's underway with a lot of responsible action by people everywhere. The damage at the Pentagon is unclear from all the news reports that I've seen. The one report that said it crashed into the Army side of the building. There are command centers in various places of the Pentagon, and there are many other alternate command centers. So I don't think there's really any issue about the command and control of the United States Armed Forces. I'm sure that's very solid right now.
General Clark, why do you say there's likely to be more trouble?
Well, we're hearing still reports of aircraft that are out there. There's no way of knowing when all of the possible incidents have either taken place or been aborted by whoever it is that's behind this. And so we have to be ready for whatever might happen next.
General, can you give us some sense of, clearly the United States has never experienced anything of this magnitude, but what are the leaders of our military, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense and others, what presumably are they doing right now in order to be on top of a situation where you have the Pentagon on fire, New York City in a state of chaos, and every federal building in Washington evacuated?
Well, first of all, we'll be trying to assess what happened. We'll be making sure that the protection posture of our bases worldwide and all of our units out there is raised so that we're able to protect our forces and our family members, and then we'll be looking to provide assistance to wherever such incidents might occur. Whatever military capabilities there will be that could be of use will be certainly made available to the other agencies of state, local, and federal government who are involved in trying to deal with these tragedies right now. Then beyond that, we'll be waiting for the information to come in about who may have been behind this, and we'll be looking at what measures can be taken to strike and prevent further actions or in punitive retaliation.
Well, speaking of that, General Clark, wouldn't you agree there are very few of the terrorist groups, at least that we're familiar with, who would have the capability to pull off something this coordinated on this scale?
I think that's exactly right. There's only one group that has ever indicated that it has this kind of ability, and that's Osama bin Laden's. So obviously that'll be the first suspicion.
Clearly we are all in a state of shock, General Clark, but is it fair to say that you're not truly surprised by this, given what we've heard from that particular group? And again, we don't know who's behind this, but given what we do know.
Well, there have been many threats made against the United States and threats of terrorism, and we know that the World Trade Center has been a target. We know that aircraft have been hijacked, and we know that car bombings are used in many places in the world, and there's no doubt that for a long time there have been groups who have tried to target the United States. Normally, many times we've gotten indications, we've been able to take actions that the American public never knows about that have broken up these attempts. In this case, for whatever reason, we didn't have the information and we weren't able to take the actions to break it up.
And General, what do you say to those Americans who are looking at these horrific pictures that they've been watching now for almost 3 hours on television, who are thinking, will I ever feel safe again in an airplane, in a tall building in this country?
I think that that will be one of the primary issues that has to be addressed by government leaders, is how to restore ever a sense of normalcy to the country. Will it ever be the same? And that's a question everybody will be asking. But I think it's too soon to expect any answers to that. I think we've got to assess this. We've got to track this down. I think one thing that comes through very clearly now is, if this is terrorism and international terrorism, then clearly there has to be a much greater degree of cooperation between nations to deal with this. Whoever did this lives somewhere. He's supported by someone, and people know him, and someone knew that these events were being planned. And if we didn't have that information, we should have. And I think that's one resolve that will come out of this from nations all over the world, that more has to be done collectively together.
But in a large sense, General Clark, whoever was behind this has clearly succeeded in the most horrific and devastating way.
Well, it's been a tragedy for America, there's no doubt about that, and for so many people and their families, our hearts go out to them.
General, we're looking, as I'm talking with General Wesley Clark, who is a former NATO commander. He's talking to us from Arkansas. We're looking at helicopters patrolling, I believe it's the area around the Pentagon, although I can't tell by the banner across the lower part of the screen. We do know that President Bush was in Florida this morning. He abruptly cut his trip short in order, we think, to fly back to Washington. And General Clark, while you are with us, what would the plans be for the President in this situation without giving away secure information? Would the President necessarily return to Washington? Is there always a plan in place in these situations?
Well, there would have to be a plan always in place to take the President to where he can best control what's going on and monitor it and make decisions, and also where he will be safe. And you can be sure that there are plans and backup plans and alternate plans to the backup plans. There'll be no shortage of efforts underway to assure his safety and his ability to maintain the continuity of government.
And once again, just finally, General Clark, as we look at these live pictures of the Pentagon, describe for us what you know of the section of the building that evidently was hit by the commercial jetliner.
That picture seems to be from the area of the bridges, the 14th Street Bridge, looking at the corner of the Pentagon that is opposite from where the strike was. So it looks like the strike hit between the 4th, 5th, maybe 6th corridors of the Pentagon. Perhaps on the Army side of the building, there are a number of offices there, administrative offices, where Army leaders and staff officers work on a daily basis. They deal with things like planning and logistics and congressional relations and public affairs in that area. And the Army leadership was probably close to where that may have impacted. There are a number of other facilities below ground, some of which have been relocated, and it's impossible to see from that picture what the condition might be there.
General Clark, any final word before we let you go?
Well, I think that we've known for some time that there were groups planning this, and I think the American people should know that the men and women in government and all the agencies have worked very hard and very diligently against this. Obviously, we didn't do enough. We didn't either have the tools or the cooperation or somehow get the information that we needed to have prevented it. And you can be sure that those men and women are right now resolved to do more and to be more effective. This is a national challenge, and I'm confident that we'll meet it.
All right, General Wesley Clark joining us now from Little Rock, Arkansas. He is, of course, the former commander of NATO, General Clark saying earlier, in his estimation, there is likely to be more trouble given the coordination and the scale of these devastating attacks this morning, September the 11th, 2001, on New York City and on Washington, D.C., and at least 4 commercial jetliners involved in these different attacks. Patty Davis, our Washington correspondent, here with me in the studio. Patty, you have some information about one of those airlines.